Here we go. Bezat Hashem. Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Oops, make sure my guitar is still there. So I see Katie is watching, and I'm not sure who else is joining us. And of course, my mother, and Avital, and Shena Batsheva, and David, and everyone who joins us later on. Shalom Aleichem to you. Apologize for the nose itch there. And of course, Yael, I'm assuming Yael is there, but if not, Yael, when you join us. And so, Baruch Hashem, I kind of feel such a relief to be over, there's Yael, Baruch Hashem, over the last lesson that we were learning, because it just seemed to go on forever. And so my plan is, and this is the plan, to go over lesson Yud Bet in Tneinã, the second part of the Likutey Moharan, lesson 12, which we have learned before in the old volume here. I have lots of notes, but we never learned it with the Oteh Ohr. So I figured it's good to learn. Now this is one of the classic lessons, like Azamra. This is called Ayeh. Ayeh, where are you? And the lesson is about getting lost in this world, forgetting Hashem is running the world, and remembering to call out to Hashem. So that's what we're going to start with, and then we're going to go to the end of Likutey Moharan, the last volume like this of Likutey Moharan, of the first part, and towards the hundreds, the lessons that start with the numbers 100, there are short lessons, sometimes 5 pages, sometimes a half a page, and my plan is just to go through that whole volume over however long it takes us. And that, I think, will be a little easier to grasp than these super long lessons, and probably after that I'll want to go back to a long lesson. I don't know, we'll see. Of course, at the end of that we'll have to do a Zamra, however long that takes. It might take us a year, a few years, who knows. What's the rush? Okay. So, unfortunately, Ayeh is not here, and Meir, and of course next week, if I'm not mistaken, they're getting married on Thursday. I better check. I have notes when to reserve the car and when to go. And then I don't expect to see them again for a while after that. And I remember when Ayeh said to me, I'm not going to be coming to the class anymore. And I was like, oh no, who gives a class where there's empty seats and nobody comes? Of course, you're watching online. But I actually leave my office and bring things to the room here and arrange the room. And okay, it's not such a big deal. But for somebody who's teaching a Torah lesson, it was in the beginning, it was like a little crisis for me. I don't know if I told the story. I don't think so, because Ayeh kept showing up. So I mentioned it to Noga. I said to her, what do you think I should do? She said, I'll tell you a story I just read about a shaliach of the Lubavitcher Rebbe who went to this place in the middle of nowhere in Russia. And he was there for something like 30 years. And he kept complaining to the Rebbe that nobody's coming closer to Judaism. He's not doing anything. He's wasting his time. And the Rebbe said, no, once you're there, you have to stay there. You're on shlichut. And the guy ended up dying, as far as we know, unfulfilled in his shlichut. He didn't merit to have, like in Surfside in South Florida, like one of the biggest Chabad houses in the United States, with tons of millions of dollars coming in and 7 different shuls for every community and the crazy things that go on there. No, this guy went to Russia, to the middle of nowhere, and felt like he did nothing. And it turns out, I don't remember exactly how the story was told, but it turns out that there was one person that came to a lesson, and that person was influenced by the rabbi, and that person raised his son as a religious Jew, and that religious Jew is Lev Levayev, who is I don't know if he's a billionaire, but he's a multi-millionaire, and a big supporter of Chabad. And Lev Levayev gives credit to this rabbi in the middle of nowhere in Russia that brought his father closer to Yiddishkeit. So I heard that story and I said, okay, even if there's going to be some weeks where I sit here and no one's online, I'm just going to keep giving the lesson, just like the Rebbe would want, Bezrat Hashem, and I'm sure also Rebbe Nachman. And if you're joining, then that's even better. And if not, I'm just going to keep going, Bezrat Hashem. Okay, so we're on Yud Bet in part 2 of Likutey Moharan. Yivaer et Godel HaKilkul כשהאדם מפרש את התורה והמצוות כפי שכלו. He's going to explain basically how big of a mess you can make if you decide to interpret the Torah and mitzvot with your own intellect. שעיקר היהדות הוא תמימות לשמוע דברי חכמים. What is the main attribute, the main aspect? Hi Zahav, Shalom Aleichem. What is the main aspect of Judaism? It's innocence, purity, simplicity, and to hear the words of the teachers, the rabbis, the wise people. That's the essence of Judaism. That's what he says here. וגם צריך בכל דבר שעושה, and everything that a person does, they have to, שיהיה רק לכבוד השם, בלבד. Should only be for Hashem's sake alone. ואז בוודאי לא ייפול. And then, if that's what a person does, then for sure they won't fall. So that's the opening line of the introduction, and that's where it is. So, Kavod Hashem, we've talked about Kavod Hashem in the past. Kavod is, in English, it's called glory, Hashem's glory. And this was one of the little tricks that Reb Shalom used to like to do. I've mentioned it before. He would say, what is the Hebrew meaning of Yael, Bezrat Hashem. You'll become a millionaire from the class. I should also become a millionaire from the class. Everyone should become a millionaire from the class. And Alice is joining us. Shalom Aleichem to Alice. And also Joe in Australia joins us. I forgot. So he liked to take the English word and say, how could it be connected to Hebrew? So glory would be Gal Ori, which is a wave of my light. And what does it mean that Hashem's glory is a wave of Hashem's light? It means that if we're doing something lichvod, or rak lichvod Hashem, only for Hashem's glory, then we are trying to bring Hashem's light into the world. That's what it means, lichvod Hashem. Or I guess that's one meaning of lichvod Hashem. So if you want to know if you're doing something lichvodcha, for your own honor, or lichvod Hashem, or for the honor of Hashem, think about how much of Hashem's light are you bringing into the world. And imagine when a person falls down and they shout out to Hashem, Ayeh makom kavodo, where are you, Hashem? They're really shouting, where are you, Hashem? You don't have to shout it like physically. I told you there's a guy who comes to Batirand and he literally comes to the shul and he says, Hashem, I know I'm not Mashiach anymore, but I still want all the hostages to come home. He shouts like that and goes on and on. He already knows me, so he looks at me, he's like, you're okay, you're okay. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. So that's bringing Hashem's glory into the world. Okay. When a person follows their own intellect and their own knowledge, ba'asiyat Torah mitzvot, in doing the Torah and mitzvot, umeferesh et ta'ameh hamitzvot kafi sichlo, and explains and interprets the reasons for doing certain mitzvot according to their own intellect, yuchal lipol betawuyim umichsholot rabim. A person can fall into many mistakes and misunderstandings. So I'll give you an example of this. Let's say we know don't steal. We're not supposed to steal, right? One of the 10 commandments. And a person says, so this was one of the stories that Reb Shalom would say. He had a roommate in college, and the guy kept showing up with all kinds of very fancy power tools. So Shalom said to him, we're both students. You don't have any money. I don't have any money. How are you buying all these power tools? So he said, well, there's a hardware store down the street. He said, yeah, I know there's a hardware store. Still, you need money to buy all those power tools. He said, well, I shoplift them. And Shalom said to him, you honestly are telling me straight to my face that you shoplift power tools and you don't have a problem saying that? He said, no, I'm keeping the owner honest. So he said, okay, how are you keeping the owner honest by shoplifting his power tools? He said, well, the owner knows that people are going to shoplift. So he adds 10% in order to cover the cost of the shoplifting. And if I don't steal his power tools, then he's cheating from everybody else. So that was his way of explaining how you can logically say that stealing is not really stealing. But stealing is stealing. That was shoplifting. That was just somebody convincing himself that he wasn't really stealing. And so if you interpret the mitzvot according to your own understanding of how things are supposed to be, then you will make many mistakes and fall into many traps. Ki yefaresh al pi hatam sheyisig, because a person is going to explain to themselves or interpret the mitzvot according to the intellect and the understanding that they have. Shebemakom hazeh hamitzvah va'atorah eina shayechot. They can say, when it comes to this mitzvah, this idea in the Torah, they're not relevant. Or sheyishaneh et hamitzvot kafi sichlo, or he's going to change the mitzvot according to the person's intellect, in the sense like what that person did with the stealing. V'lavo liyidei ra'ot gadolim chas v'shalom, and it can bring a person to doing terrible things, God forbid. V'yesh shenkinkelu harbe kagon harashaim hagadolim. I'm just checking to see the notes here. Okay. And there are those that made a lot of big mistakes and also brought other people to doing transgressions, like the famous ones, hamachshilim et ha'bekolsim, that tripped up those people that were heretics, shehitu et ha'olam, that tricked the whole world, v'akol haya al yedei chokhmatam v'sichlam. And all of that was according to their own intellect and cleverness. So what we're talking about when we come to the intellect and cleverness is Shabtai Tzvi and Jacob Frank. And we've talked about them before. Shabtai Tzvi, who lived from 1626 to 1676. Now, these numbers are important. And also Jacob Frank, 1726 to 1791. So the Baal Shem Tov passed away in 1740. And boy, when did he, I guess he was born in something like 1680, I forgot. Maybe 1684, that's the number that's sticking in my head, whenever the Baal Shem Tov was born. But the Baal Shem Tov was born after Shabtai Tzvi. Now, Shabtai Tzvi, everybody knows the story of Shabtai Tzvi, but I'll just tell it in short. There were the massacres of the Chalmanetsky gang. And by the way, when I was in Ukraine, that was 5 years ago, there were statues of Chalmanetsky, like big, glorious statues, like him on a horse, on a huge marble made of metal, and like an enormous one with his sword in the air, and I think maybe a cross on the other hand or something like that. This is the guy who slaughtered something like 50,000 Jews. Now, you can say, okay, 50,000 Jews, that's really bad, but 6 million is a lot worse. But you have to understand that in 1648, nobody was shot. Everybody was killed with a knife or their bare hands. And to kill 50,000 Jews, to murder 50,000 Jews, is a lot harder than what the Nazis did. And it was just the predecessor for the Holocaust. Had Chalmanetsky had the technology that the Nazis had in the early 1900s, they would have done the same thing. And so this massacre was looked at as the Holocaust of its time. And it left Jews devastated. And to add one more thing on top of it, there was no state of Israel, because at least after the Holocaust, even during the Holocaust, the state of Israel hadn't officially been declared, but there were Jews coming and living here in the land of Israel. There was an army being built, and in 1948, there was a state of Israel. So there was a place for Jews to go after the war, okay? In that period, there wasn't a place for them to go. But it's different than after Shabtai Tzvi. And so the after effects of Shabtai Tzvi created a huge crisis of faith in the Jewish community. And when Shabtai Tzvi came around and he said, I'm the Messiah, and I'm going to bring everybody back to the land of Israel, there were many thousands of people that followed him and believed him. And he ended up, of course, he took the group, I don't remember how many it was. There's some notes at the end here. He took the group to Turkey, to Istanbul, to bring them to the land of Israel. I'm just looking to see if there's numbers here for Shabtai Tzvi. I don't see it. And he ended up converting to Islam and changed his name to whatever it was, Yusuf Islam. And so that was like, so here you have the Jews that were devastated by the Holocaust of its day, not having a state of Israel to look back on and fall back on, not having any rights, not having anything. And here's a guy who says he's Mashiach, and tens of thousands, I'm assuming, believed him and followed him, and then he converts to Islam. And then, not long after, so we're talking 1726, so this is, he was born in 1726, 1791. So Rebbe Nachman passed away in 1810. So they're overlapping one another. You have Jacob Frank. And Jacob Frank also had this idea that he was the Messiah, and he ended up bringing at least 26,000 Jews to convert to Christianity. And they believed in this idea, and it's important to this lesson, that's why I'm mentioning it. They believed in this idea that they could, as Jews, convert to Christianity and then elevate Christianity, because Christianity was the darkest of all evils. And of course, in the end, they just ended up converting to Christianity. They didn't elevate anything. Now, this lesson is connected to Shabtai Tzvi. That's why it's important that I mentioned it here. And that, when he says here, Kagon HaReshayim HaGedolim Ma'od HaMeforsamim. Those are the famous ones that tripped up all these people. Okay, so we're going to continue. How are we doing with time? V'ikar hayadut hu rak lelech betmimiyut upshitut. This is also one of Rebbe Nachman's big lessons, to go in the way of tmimiyut pshitut. Here he calls it Innocence and simplicity. That's really what it is. Innocence and simplicity. What does innocence mean? It means the opposite of being cynical. So somebody will say to you, like when you walk with a little kid in the street, and the kid says, "Who planted that tree?" And you say to the kid, "God planted that tree." And the kid says, "Oh, okay." Makes sense to like a little kid. And you have a 15-year-old, for example, and the 15-year-old says to you, "Who planted that tree?" And you say, "God planted that tree." And the 15-year-old says, "What are you talking about? God didn't plant that tree. Somebody had to plant that tree." So that's the difference between innocence and not being innocent. So not to be a fool, not to be an idiot, but to be innocent enough to hear something and believe it. Even if you don't understand it, like when it comes from Torah and mitzvot, or when it comes from the lessons of Rebbe Nachman, to just take it and absorb it. Innocence and simplicity. And simplicity is one of the big concepts, of course, of Rebbe Nachman as well, not to be sophisticated. So if we were going to turn it around, being cynical and sophisticated will distance you so far from Hashem that you'll either give up or you'll just be a very frustrated person. You want to come close to Hashem, you want to have a relationship with Hashem, you have to have the tmimut pshitut. You have to have the innocence and simplicity. Bli shum chokhmot. With no sophistication. To be chacham, to be smart, but not chokhmot, but not sophistication. Ulistakel b'kol davar she'oseh sheyesh sham Hashem yitbarach. A person should look at everything they do, and they should find Hashem in everything that they do. Kedei sheyu ma'asav rak lichvod Hashem yitbarach. So that it will be, the person's actions will only be for Hashem's sake. Now, meaning for Hashem's sake and not for your own sake. Because I don't think, maybe some people would think differently. I don't think I have a big ego. I'm not so interested in tooting my own horn, as my grandmother called it. But I have a friend who has an enormous ego. And the guy is, I think, on the border of mental illness. But he really thinks a great deal of himself. And he ends up falling into the trap that Rebbe Nachman talks about. Because he's doing it for his own honor and not for Hashem's honor. And Hashem is not giving him what he wants. So then he thinks that the world owes him when the world owes him nothing. So you have to be careful that you're doing everything for Hashem, and the way that you do that is you find Hashem in it. So I'll give you a simple example. Okay, this Torah lesson, for example, or I lead the davening in several shuls. My wife and I host people on Shabbos. People say to me, "If you do all the cooking, what does she do?" She does all the cleaning. And she also makes sure that the family is together. She does everything besides the cooking, for Shabbos at least. And you could say, okay, I'm doing all these meals, I'm cooking, it's for my honor, it's for my own glory, in a sense. But I know that achnasat ochim, having guests on Shabbos, is not for me, it's for Hashem, and it gives me such enormous pleasure to really be the servant in Hashem's palace that gets to serve the guests that come to the palace, and even cook the food, and even buy the food. And so when you make that change from, I'm doing it for my own honor, I'm doing it for Hashem's honor, that's the point that he's making here, that you should listakel b'kol davar she'oseh sheyeh sham Hashem yitbarach. Find Hashem in everything kadei sheyu ma'asav rak lichvod Hashem yitbarach, so that everything you do will be for Hashem's glory or His honor, or bring Hashem's light into the world. Livli la'ashkiach klal an kvod atzmo, without worrying at all about your own honor. And now there's a little big note here that we're going to go over quickly, Be'ezat Hashem. This is from Likutey Moharan. In Likutey Moharan, I'll just explain it if you don't know what it is. So the whole Breslov library is written, the main Breslov library is written by Rebbe Nachman. And after Rebbe Nachman passed away, Rebbe Nachman took the Shulchan Aruch, which is the book of Jewish law, and he went halacha and found a way to connect Rebbe Nachman's Torahs to all of the halachot and the Shulchan Aruch. And that's called Likutey Moharan. I don't know if he covers every single halacha, and a lot of times I'm not even sure what the connection is to the Torah, and also the Torahs that he brings are many times an idea from Rebbe Nachman that he expands upon. So basically, he expanded on Likutey Moharan in Likutey Halachot. So when we bring Likutey Halachot, that's what we're bringing. V'zeh leshono, and this is what it says. Ikar hatshuva hi anava b'bchinat bitul. The main way that a person does tshuva is by being humble. Humility is expressed in bittul. Bittul is nullification of one's ego. Not obliteration of one's ego, but nullification, meaning you're not there for yourself, but you have enough ego to act in the world. K'moshe katuv, as it's written, Bakshu et Hashem kol anvei haaretz. Those who call out to Hashem, or the prayers that reach out to Hashem, are from the humble people of the land. Kol anvei haaretz, daika, the humble people of the land specifically, ki kshehu anav ve'eno choshesh an kavod atzmo, because when a person is humble and they're not concerned about their own honor, klal at all, rak an kavod Hashem yitbarach, but only for Hashem's honor, meaning they don't want to bring their own light into the world, they want to bring Hashem's light into the world. Azai hu yachol levakesh et Hashem, then a person can call out to Hashem. Even when a person has a downfall. So you can imagine, let's say a person has a great taiva, a great desire for non-kosher food. And they're keeping kosher, but they just can't take it anymore. There's some, I'm just making this up, what's it called? Some type of Doritos that is not kosher, but it used to be kosher and is their favorite flavor, ranch flavor, I was thinking of, or whatever, some kind of crazy flavor, and they say, I know I shouldn't be eating it, but I eat it anyhow. Now, really, were they eating treif? I'm not sure. Maybe, I guess if there was really lard in there, they would be eating treif, but sometimes there just isn't the hechsher on something for one reason or another. And, but still, that's considered like a very simple yerida, going down. And so a person could say, wow, I broke my promise to myself not to eat those Doritos, and I ate them anyhow. Even a person that's in that place can call out to Hashem, and all the more so if it's something worse, whatever you did. And everything can be elevated in an essential elevation. So, meaning that even if you think that you're in the lowest place, you're not even deserving to call out to Hashem, when you call out to Hashem, it can raise everything up, everything. Because when a person is not concerned about their own honor, but only about Hashem's honor, then when a person falls, even when a person falls, God forbid, then what does a person do when a person is not so self-absorbed that all they're thinking about is themselves? Then when they fall, what do? They call out to Hashem and they seek Hashem, and they say to Hashem, where is your place of glory? Meaning, Hashem, where are you being revealed in this world? So let's just take a simple example of that. Here's a good example. I have a good friend who has been in Gaza for so many hundreds of days. Now this guy is in his late 30s. He's married. He has children. He has a very, very good career. Makes a lot of money. Not his own business. It's a career. And he's been called to Miluim 4 times. And it's really gotten him depressed. He's really upset. He's upset. He feels like he wasted his time. He's upset at the upper echelon of the army that he thinks gave him bad orders that caused soldiers to be killed and injured unnecessarily. He has this whole thing going on. And this has been going on, like I see him every time he comes back from Miluim, so I see it on his face that he's really carrying a lot of weight, and I happen to see him on Purim. I actually saw him at the end of the day of Purim. And I have an intuition sometimes when it comes to seeing people's faces or body language, and I could see clearly that this guy was really upset about this. And he wasn't saying, Ayeh makom kavodo. He wasn't saying, Hashem, where are you revealed in this world? He's a very humble guy. He wasn't trying to dwell in his own ego, but he was dwelling in his own ego. And so at some point, this was already post-Purim, it was probably around 7 o'clock at night. I went to another Suda, and that's where I saw him. And I saw this look on his face, and I went over to him, and I gave him a big hug. And I started crying, and he started crying. And I said to him, what you did was good. What you did was good. Maybe the commanders gave you bad orders. Maybe the army had a bad strategy. Maybe it feels like you wasted your time. But what you did was good. And it was good for the Jewish people. It was good for me, and it was good for your family. And what you did was good. And he said, how do I know? And I can't prove to him, how do I know? So I told him, I know. So you're going to have to trust me that I know. Now, I've known him since he was probably 3 or 4 years old. I've known him his whole life, so he knows who I am, and we're good friends as well. And so he said, at some point he decided, he said, and he was really crying, he said, I'm going to trust you. And I could see this weight taken off of him. He said, I'm going to trust you. And I told him, if you have any doubts, call me, and I'll remind you to just trust me. Now that's the change that Rebbe Nachman is talking about right here. He says, when you go from being self-absorbed to crying out to Hashem and saying, where are you, Hashem? Where is your light being revealed in this situation in my life? Where is it? It could be with anything. It could be with, God forbid, a health problem, a financial problem, shalom bayit problem, problems with their children, problems with getting married, problems with having kids, problems with whatever it is. You call out and you say, Hashem, where is your glory? And the second that you do that, you change it from being about me to being about Hashem. V'al yadei zeh aliyato v'tikuno. And by saying these words, by changing the way that you look at this creates the aliyah, the elevating of the situation you're in, and also the fixing for it. The kol zeh al yadei ha'anava va'bitul. And all of this comes about because a person is humble and nullified their ego. Ki azai shemitbatel kvod atzmo shu b'chinat avodah zara. Because when a person nullifies their own self-worth, not to be a doormat, but in saying, I deserved to have better orders in the army. I deserve to have spent my time better in the army. This is a b'china, this is an aspect of avodah zarah, of idol worship. Because in a sense, you're worshiping yourself. I could just, the example I gave of my friend is a little extreme because I completely understand where he's coming from. I probably would have been kicked out of the army by then if I had been in Miluim 4 times for as long as him. But let's take somebody that doesn't want to work. I know somebody like this as well. He has no money, doesn't want to work. He feels that he deserves money just because of who he is, which is no one. There's no reason for anyone to give him any money. And so he has no money, and so he gets caught in the cycle. I deserve money because I'm a great person. Okay, you're a great person, go get a job. No, I don't need a job. That's considered avodah zarah. So when you nullify yourself, which worshipping yourself in a sense is this avodah zarah. V'al yada nistar v'ne'alam kavod Hashem yitbarach biyoter. And this is how Hashem's glory is hidden in the greatest way. So this person that doesn't want to work and thinks that he just deserves money because he just deserves it, that is only creating a greater blockage of Hashem, the greatest blockage of Hashem. But when a person nullifies this and changes the way that they're speaking, and then they call out to Hashem and they say, Hashem, where is your glory? Where is your light revealed in this world? Because if you're starting off by having your own self-honor, God forbid, and not the honor of Hashem. Shu b'chinat avodah zarah. This is a type of self-worship, idol worship. Azayin nistar v'ne'alam kavod yitbarach b'tachlit ha'asara. Then you're hiding Hashem's light in the ultimate way of hiding it. You're hiding it in a total way. So how will we hide something in a totally hidden way? I'm thinking of cryptocurrency. So somebody takes money, they put it in a cryptocurrency, they put it on some chip, and now it's hidden in a way that no one can find it, only the person that has it. On that chip, somewhere in the world, there is money, but good luck finding it. That's basically what people are doing with their relationship with Hashem. They're creating such a hiddenness in their relationship with Hashem that they're never going to find Hashem. How do they do it? Through the self-worship. Ad she'ein yicholim afilo levakesh lechapes ayeh makom kavoda yitbarach, to the point that a person isn't even capable of calling out and reaching out to Hashem and saying, Hashem, where are you? Hashem, show yourself to me. Ki ein yodim klal mikvodo yitbarach, because they don't even acknowledge Hashem's existence. Ki nistar v'ne'alam b'tachlit ha'astara al yedei hitgabrut kavod acher chas v'shalom, because they have completely hidden Hashem through strengthening their own honor, God forbid, or the honor of something besides Hashem. It could be the honor of science, the honor of atheism, whatever it is. That will create such a distance that you won't be able to see Hashem. But that reminds me of Christopher Hitchens. You probably heard of Christopher Hitchens, who turns out was Jewish, which is the craziest thing. He was an English intellectual, passed away, but he was the big atheist. He was the guy who did the great atheist, the God debates. And he was a brilliant guy and a brilliant debater. And he would not believe in God, would not believe in God. In the end, he got the machala. He got very sick. And at the end of his life, he said, maybe I was wrong. And it reminds me of the joke, I tried atheism, but I had doubts. And just for a guy like that who made his whole career and his whole life about denying God's existence and telling everybody else, you're a bunch of fools, when he's looking at death's door, all of a sudden he says, maybe I was wrong. And for all I know, he went even further and said, maybe, or just said, I was wrong. Now, how did it turn out that he was Jewish? His grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. She came to England. She decided not to tell anyone in the family that she was Jewish. She married a goy, and her mother married a goy and had Christopher. And then when he started to become famous, people made the connection, and it turned out that he and his brother were Jews. But when you nullify all of those external honors, and you don't bother looking at your own honor at all, you just want Hashem's honor, even though a person is still very far from being connected to Hashem's light, because the person fell to the place that they fell to, nonetheless, al yedei shehu mevakesh mechapes ayeh makom kavodo, but just by a person calling out to Hashem and seeking Hashem and saying, Hashem, where is your glory? Where is your presence in this world? Because now that a person doesn't want the other honor, the self-honor, or whatever other honor it is, only the honor of Hashem, the glory of Hashem, and so even though a person is on this very lowly level, nonetheless, he still seeks out Hashem. Ayeh makom kavodo. Where are you, Hashem, in this world? And this is what will raise the person up and will fix the situation that they're in. And Rebbe Nachman was more precise and specific, and he said, shelo yachush an kavod atzmo klal, rak an kavod Hashem yitbarach. A person shouldn't even feel their own honor. A person shouldn't even feel that they have to receive honor. Only the honor of Hashem. They should only be wanting to be Hashem's representative in this world in only a positive way. Ve'az afilu ksheyesh lo yirida. And then even when a person has a descent, a fall, hu oleh b'tachlit aliyah, the person will ultimately be raised up. Ki daika ksheino choshesh al kavod atzmo klal. Because specifically when a person is not concerned about their own honor, az daika yachol lischot lebchinat yirida tachlit aliyah. Then a person merits that their descent was ultimately for the purpose of an ascent. Meaning that when you fall, if you're seeking out Hashem, you will eventually be pulled up. You will eventually go up even higher, because in order to reach a higher place, you have to go low. Right? That's why where a Baal Tshuva stands, a Tzaddik Kamor can't stand, because the Baal Tshuva was in a lower place than the Tzaddik. And when you reach the lower place, you can reach a higher place. Ki ha'aliyah hi al yedei b'bchinat Ayeh. Where is the elevation? It comes by saying the word Ayeh. Where are you, Hashem? Ve'efshar lizkot lazeh ki im al yedei b'chinat bitul. But a person can only merit this if they've nullified their ego. Shivater atzmo legamrei v'lo yachush al kavodo klal. That a person should completely nullify themselves and not be concerned about their own honor at all. Okay, that's where we're going to stop tonight. I had planned on going further, but we'll continue next week. It's all good. I have a short story for you. I actually forgot to print up the story. I went over the story. I printed up the story. I forgot to take it from my office. Pretty silly of me, but I remember the story. So Rebbe Moshe Lev of Sasov. I would have looked up the connection. I don't remember who he's connected to, but he's one of the big tzaddikim, the big rabbis. So he was once walking in a town where there wasn't much of a Jewish community, and he sees a bunch of schnorrers and drunks laying on the street in front of a tavern, and they're begging for money, and whenever they get some money, they go to the tavern and they buy something to drink, and they're just sitting there, drunk. And he sees a guy that's clearly Jewish. He has a beard, he has a kippah, he has tzitziot, completely drunk, laying there on the ground with all the drunks. And Reb Moshe Lev Sasov thinks to himself, what is this guy doing here? You know, if a person gets to the place where they're drunk and they're just begging for money so they can drink more, you would think that they wouldn't bother wearing tzitziot anymore. He wouldn't wear a kippah, wouldn't have a beard. He'd just be like all the other goyim. And he thought, this guy is something special. And so he decided to observe him from a distance. And when the sun set and all the schnorrers and the drunks went to sleep, so this guy, he crawls up from amongst the bodies there, and he starts heading into the forest. And Reb Moshe Lev Sasov follows him to the forest, and he sees him go into a tree, and he pulls out a bundle, and it is a little match and a candle and a book of Tehillim. And he lights the candle and he starts saying Tehillim, and he says to Hashem, Hashem, I know you made me a hidden tzaddik, but people don't get to see who I really am. And this is totally relevant to this lesson. And I looked up the story, I didn't realize the connection. He said, people don't realize who I am, and I can't handle this anymore. Hashem, you gave me too hard of a challenge to make me a tzaddik that I have to hide myself. And I want to give up. I've had enough, Hashem. I want to give up. And then he lights the candle and he's saying his Tehillim, and he says to Hashem, Hashem, don't let my candle go out. Please, Hashem, don't let my candle go out. And so the next morning, and that night he goes back to the pile of drunkards outside the tavern, and he falls asleep amongst them. And when he wakes up in the morning, Reb Moshe Lev of Sasov is watching him, sitting there, waiting for the drunk hidden tzaddik to open his eyes. And he sees him, and he's shocked to see this tzaddik standing in front of him. And Reb Moshe Lev says to the drunkard, to the hidden tzaddik, he said, other people see your cup, he has a cup, he's just asking for something to drink or asking for some money. Rebbe Moshe Lev said, but I see your light. And he said, Hashem won't let your light go out. I promise you, He won't let your light go out. And those words were the words that hidden tzaddik needed to hear in order to keep on going and not give up. And that's really what we're saying. We're saying to Hashem, give us words of inspiration. Give us the words of Rebbe Moshe Lev of Sasov, that my light won't go out, that you won't give up on me, Hashem, that even though things can be very hard in my life, and I can be challenged in so many ways, in so many directions, Hashem, don't let my light go out. So Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll continue next week until we get closer to Pesach, and then we'll take a break, but we'll just keep going until we finish the lesson and get what we can from it. Yasher Koach, everyone, for sticking around. Let's sing a little Nikun.